Another week has passed, another episode of Least Talk Forever, and another episode without Kyle. It's just me and Scott here on the podcast with you tonight. We got action-packed week that was that just happened with the Leafs dropping what 4 or 5,
I know they dropped 3 of 4.
3 or 4. Sorry. So we're gonna get all of that to you, plus lineup news, all of the fun stuff. This episode is called Trending Downward. We're in a partnership with the Hockey Podcast Network. Check them out on Twitter. Check them out on Instagram. Check them out on Facebook. Check out their Facebook because they got some cool lives. And check out their YouTube because they have streaming parties. Scott, without further ado, we're going to send it over to you. What do you want to talk about?
All right, for the news. So this week that just passed, um, there isn't really that big of news. It's more like just generalized topics that we thought would be interesting to go over. So to start with, we have Pontus Holmberg got called up, and Wayne Simmons got sent down, which I thought was interesting. Mostly because there's been the way the Leafs have been playing anyway. There's been clamoring for them to keep Simmons in the lineup, to keep with that grittiness, that physicality. Uh, if or when Austin Reese and Albie Kubel are in the lineup anyway, add that protection, I guess, and especially after last night's game with the Connecty Matthews thing, I feel like it's kind of warranted a little bit more than it was towards the beginning of the season, or more towards the beginning of the season. Um, and then because of that, Holmberg was slotted on the third line, which means that Nick Robertson was a healthy scratch. I'm not sure why on that either, because I thought he's been playing well in the role he's been given. The first game he played, he got 2 goals, and then he was moved to a line with Morgan and Robertson. I'm pretty sure, or Nylander and Robertson, or sorry, Nylander and Morgan, which I thought that line played pretty well in the game that they were together. And then that was quickly broken up because they continued the shuffling of the lines to try to make sure something was working because they were kind of in a downward spiral there. And because of those reshufflings, Justin Hall, you know our feelings on Justin Hall if you listen more often than the average viewer. He was moved to the top pair to play with TJ Brody, along with those shufflings, which caused Morgan Riley to fall to the second pair to play with Sandin and then Victor Mete. And then in those shufflings, there's been a continued rotation in the bottom six with Abe Kubel and Austin Reese and Morgan and Simmons, and now Holmberg being shuffled in. So I just wanted to get your thoughts on those, Spencer. They all kind of intertwine there, mostly just around the shuffling of the lineup and who gets to play and who doesn't get to play.
Um, Two things. My first thought on this is Nick Robertson needs to play. You know what's going to happen to Nick Robertson if he doesn't play and he gets sent down? A trade. You know what's going to happen then? Then he's going to turn out to be Mason Marchment. So put the guy in the damn lineup and let him play. The only reason he's out is because the novelty wore off because apparently he's not doing things on both sides of the puck.
Yeah, you
So,
know who else isn't doing things on both sides of the puck that needs to sit but isn't? Pierre Engvall.
yeah, I agree. I couldn't
In
agree
in
more.
in the 2 games or 3 games that 3 games, 4 games that Nick Robertson played, he's done more in those 4 games than Pierre Engvall has done in the 8 games he's played. Yet somehow Pierre Engvall is still being put in the lineup, third line, fourth line, shuffled around during the game, and Nick Robertson, who already at this point has more goals than Pierre Engvall, is a healthy scratch for reasons that I'm not really sure why.
Yeah, and this goes to the other point, which kind of coincides with Nick Robertson and Ingval, is Abe Kubel is out of the lineup because Sheldon Keefe said that he needs to quote unquote work on aspects of his game. You were brought here to do forechecking, to check, to play defensive style, to cycle the puck, to break up cycles. That's what he did. He played third line minutes in Colorado. How long ago did Colorado play? Oh, I think they played 6 months ago, and Toronto played 8 months ago last season. So I just can't understand why Sheldon Keefe is so critical of Abe Kubel when he's the only one on this team with recent post 2010 Stanley Cup championship experience. I just can't understand. It just doesn't make
Yeah.
sense. You're ripping on this guy for what reason? Because he's not quote unquote showing up. He's doing his job. He had 19 hits in 3 games. How many hits does a leading player on the Leafs have right now? Who is it? Austin Matthews? Like, there's a reason why Austin Matthews should be scoring and not checking, and there's a reason why you brought in Abe Kubel, and that's to check, to do the things that he's been doing. Apparently, they want him to jump on more opportunities on the puck too. Like
Yeah.
Abe
Which
Kubel, Malgin, who else? I guess Pierre Engvall could be put into that. Yarncroke. They're not Mitch Marners. They're not Austin Matthews. Put them in a role, let them play those games, put them in the lineup, and let them get chemistry with each other. Because as Scott pointed out, there's so many lineup changes.
yeah, and like
You know,
even going into the season, like that's all the hype was about. When they got Abe Kubel and then they got Austin Reese on the PTO, it was like these are the replacements for Simmons and Clifford because collectively they had more hits than Simmons and Clifford. You brought them in to be the physicality. You brought them in to be the gritty digging line who doesn't score but can hem the other team in their own end, and when they're not hemmed in, can play defensive style like you mentioned. So where all of a sudden 3 games into the season when Aubé Kubel has one shot and you're like, yeah, you need to shoot more, you need to score, you need to become more offensive minded, or else you're not going to be in the lineup. Like that's not what you brought him into the team to do. You have a top six of, I mean, I guess maybe five, depending on else is in that top six. If it's Robertson, I'd say top six. If it's Kerfoot, I'd say top five. Who are like offensive powerhouses. Like Bunting was a surprise last year with 60 points, and he already has what 7, 8 this year. Matthews is the reigning MVP, Rocket Richard Trophy winner. Tavares is a perennial 80, 90 point player. Nylander's a perennial 70 point player, and Mitch Marner's a perennial 100 point player. You don't need Nicholas Abe Kubel to go out there and put up 70 points or 50 points. Like last year, Pierre Engvall had what 21 points, and he played a whole almost the full season. So why then, after 3 games, is Nicholas Abe Kubel, who isn't an offensive player whatsoever, getting put in the doghouse for not putting up points when at the same time he had the same amount of points as Cal Yarncroke, Pierre Engvall, Wayne Simmons, Kyle Clifford, etc., etc., etc.
it's funny.
It just, it,
Every
go.
podcast I listen to has some kind of. Usually, this is how it is. Usually, every podcast I listen to has some kind of former NHL player that is kind of on the lower end of talent. Today, I was listening to the radio and old Leaf Christopher Stieg was on, and he mentioned something that he thought was a little bit interesting about Sheldon Keefe's coaching strategy, and that is that if you look at Kyle Clifford, Kyle Clifford got suspended after game one of the playoffs last year. He didn't play again till what game? What was it?
He
Five of
didn't
the
play
season.
again. Oh yeah, yeah,
Yeah, but I
this year,
mean,
yeah,
he didn't. He barely played in the preseason. He didn't have any
yeah,
chance of making the team. Okay. Then when the coach needs him to play because they're playing Winnipeg and he doesn't want his team to get pushed around, it's here, Kyle. I'm going to forget that I had a grudge and I'm going to put you in the lineup. Same thing that I did to Mitch Marner. Same thing that he's doing to Abe Kubel, which other notable grinders have pointed out, including Nick Kipros, that type of role is hard to play in because when you're in the doghouse, you're not going to get back in the lineup if someone plays well until that person plays well. So in a sense, you're hoping that the person who replaces you in the lineup is playing bad. So Abe
yeah,
Kubel gets replaced by Wayne Simmons, and then Abe Kubel internally is thinking, "Damn, I want him to play bad so that I can come in the lineup." How is that good? How are you not letting guys get chemistry with each other? Like you're switching out every game, so then it's building what? It's not building an internal competition. I don't
yeah.
think.
Me neither.
I think that's
And like
bad for the morale.
I get that point, but normally when that happens, there's a valid reason of why that guy isn't in the lineup.
Yeah, exactly,
Like the
exactly. But
reason
in
that
this
Sheldon
situation,
Keefe
it's not.
gave, the reason that Sheldon Keefe gave, sorry, doesn't make any sense. We need you to work on other aspects of your game that you're not showing us. Like that's not what you brought him in to do. You literally brought him in to do one thing: hit. He's your fourth line gritty. Like he's a power forward. He doesn't need to go out there and put up 40, 50, 60 plus points. And in 3 games to say that he's not showing up when all but 2 players on your team weren't showing up, that baffles my mind. Like, Justin Hall has been playing like crap, and he got promoted. Willie Nylander, who besides the last game, 2, 3 games maybe, was arguably the best player the Leafs had, was demoted to the 3rd line and played 14 minutes. Meanwhile, Pierre Engvall, who has 1 goal and literally done nothing else, is playing, what, 11, 12 minutes a game when he should be sitting in the press box? Like, it just the moves that Sheldon Keefe has been making and the reasons behind making those moves is just baffling.
Yeah, I'm just confused on what let's call a space spade here. He's doing it trying to save his job.
Yeah,
At this
okay, but
point,
they
he's
haven't
trying
been
to do it to.
besides last game, they haven't been working.
No, I
Like,
know, but I
there's
mean,
no
in his mind, he probably thinks like the more he changes up the lineup, eventually one's going to click.
well, yeah. Like, even go back to the Winnipeg game. Like, there was no moment in that game where both Simmons and Clifford needed to be in it. There was no overly physical, gritty fighting aspects of the game. So what? Like, I get going into the game, you didn't know that was going to happen. Yeah, but to have both of them in and then have Austin Reese and Abe Kubel sitting out when both of those guys do arguably a better job at playing Clifford's game than Clifford does at this point in his career, you could have just put Simmons in. Like, the moves that he's making to try to save his job, the lineup changes, the shuffling, the moving players up, moving players down, his favorites still being in the lineup. It's just baffling me as to why any of that is happening.
And that's in a nutshell what me and Scott have been talking about, along with Kyle in the group chat, for the better part of a week. Because every game, it's a surprise on who's going to be in the lineup, and also the antics of the 23 skaters that he dressed against Anaheim in the warm up. Like, like what kind of BS is that? Like, that's humiliating.
Oh
People
yeah, and
actually, other people like other fan bases podcasts, other podcasts based in America, those reporters were making fun of the Leafs for that.
is that the game where he told the before the game that he made lineup changes, but he wasn't going to reveal them until the game started?
Yeah, against Anaheim. And he
And
dressed all
okay, I
23
didn't know if that was
skaters.
Anaheim or LA,
Yeah,
but
and
I
then
feel like that was just a move by him because he knew that if he put out the lineup before the game, like a good portion before the game, then people would have been ripping him to no hell because that's the game that Justin Hall got moved up to the top pair.
yeah, but it's like you dressed
Especially at
23 skaters. You got guys to get ready who weren't knowingly not in the game to get ready because the team knows the lineup. So then they go out there. Zach Aston Reese goes out there. I don't even know if he played in that game, but let's just say he didn't. Gets dressed, skates for
I think he
15
did.
minutes in pregame warm up just to sit down because your coach is trying to put on a, like what
Yeah,
mysterious scare tactic. It didn't work.
remind reminds me of something like Roger Nielsen would have, or Roger Nielsen. No, what's the guy's name? He used to be the
Harold Bauer.
yeah
Harold
with
Bauer.
Roger Nielsen and putting the paper bag on his head so no one knew it was him.
Yeah, it's just like that's just almost as as an embarrassing, or as as wow, almost as embarrassing. Sorry, as the we got respect in the handshake line comment from Tampa Bay when they got beat out. Those things do not matter. You dressing 23 forwards or 23 players to try and pick your lineup, you already knew. The players already knew. That's embarrassing. People
Yep.
around the NHL were making fun of your tactics of the team. Like, what are you doing? I'm baffled.
Yeah.
I'm truly baffled on the decisions he's making.
And I don't know. Like I made this comparison to you. I don't remember if I mentioned it last podcast or not, but I mentioned it to you off podcast. Is the way that this is going? It kind of reminds me of um, Charlie Montoyo with the Blue Jays. Like he
Oh
took
yeah.
over from, I mean, took over from John Gibbons in the Blue Jays case, but a coach that people were interested in keeping around for most of his time, and then once he left, they wanted him back. Like a pretty much a fan favorite coach, and then he took over a team that was trending in the right direction. In the case of the Leafs, anybody could have coached, when you had the players that they have, and then it just seems like this past season with the Blue Jays and this season with the Leafs, and I guess you could argue earlier in last season with the Leafs too. It just seems like he's kind of not necessarily proving that he doesn't know what he's doing, but it's proving that he's not necessarily the coach everybody thought he was.
Yeah.
And I think there needs to be a change at some point if this continues because it's kind of getting pathetic.
And I'm just going to say this because a lot of people seem to neglect this point. Sheldon Keefe is a good coach. Like, I'll give him that. However, there is aspects of his coaching that I don't agree with, that most people don't agree with, whatever. However, moral of the story is he came into a situation where the players were basically, I'd say, emotionally beaten down based on how Mike Babcock coaches. They were worn out, they were tired, they're mentally exhausted, whatever. He was a fun, chill guy to be around. Made jokes, was put the music on in the practices or whatever. Now he's resorting backwards. He's resorting to that guy that it doesn't seem. Did you watch that clip when he was yelling basically at the team on the bench and pointing out Mitch Marner?
Yeah, that's when Marner got benched.
Yeah, but did you see that clip? Did you watch the whole
Yeah,
clip?
yeah.
Just so you saw Nylander?
Oh,
He
well, I
wasn't even
wasn't
paying
paying
attention.
attention. I wasn't.
Nylander was literally leaning against the boards with his head looking at the ice, and then turned around and was just looking at the fans on the other side of the ring. His back was towards Sheldon Keefe. Austin Matthews wasn't paying attention. Mitch Marner is probably only paying attention because his name got called. And John Tavares was doing that eye squinting thing, like, please shut your fucking mouth because no one wants to hear you anymore. Like, I understand that these guys are saying, oh, we're supporting Keefe for this, that, the other. It's like, maybe these guys are actually frustrated or actually tired. And it's not the same comparison as the Vancouver situation. Everyone keeps saying, well, that's two coaches for Toronto, that's two coaches for Vancouver. The difference is when Travis Green took over for Vancouver, they went to what? The conference finals in the bubble? They weren't supposed to be that good. They were that good. Like they turned out to be that good. Every year after that, they played down to what everyone's expectations were. When Mike Babcock took over this team, the expectation was they were going to get Matthews and they were going to be like the greatest team in the league, the best team in the league. And now we've had what, 6 first round exits? It's
Yeah.
it's to me, it's like it's not the same. Those two things don't correlate. And I got into a little discussion on some with some guy on Twitter when I said changes need to be had, and he said, "This is the same thing. I don't feel that way. This is the same thing that happened last year." Is that acceptable? Like, I don't understand why that's an option. I was like, "No, the players look disengaged. It just feels different to me." You know why it feels different? Because it was another first round exit.
Yeah, but it is different though. Like there was at no point in last year's slow start did it ever seem like Toronto didn't want to play. Like maybe a couple shifts or maybe a game here and there. But when they started whatever they started the previous season and they the slow start, like nobody like most of the fan base wasn't panicking. They just chalked it up to a slow start and the team would turn things around. This year, however, it seems like the team is actually not playing well. Like there's actually a reason to panic because the team is playing like crap.
Yeah.
Last year's slow start, barring the plays here and there, like Toronto was competing with the other teams. They were just coming up short in at the end of the games. But this season, for most of the games, they've looked like they didn't even care. Like the game against Arizona, the game against Vegas, the game against San Jose, the game against LA, that blown lead against Anaheim. For almost 2/3 of the game, they looked like they didn't even want to be on the ice. The other team was just walking all over them. You can't say it's similar to last season because it's not. That didn't happen last season until maybe some parts of the playoffs. But like the first however many games it was, 8 games last year, where people are like, "Oh, it's almost identical, same stats, whatever." Yeah, the stats may be similar, but the feeling and the panic and the way the players are engaged in the game is two completely different situations.
That's exactly what I was getting at. Was it is different. And the other reason why I think it is so different, and I can't stress this enough about Leafs fans because it drives me up the damn wall. What every year that Toronto's had a first round exit, what's the first thing they say?
Get rid of Dubas and
Changes
Keefe.
need to be made. Get rid of Tavares. Get rid of Marner. Trade Matthews. Trade Nylander. This team needs to rebuild. This team needs to blow it up. No excuses. This is not the same. Every year is not the same. Blah 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 blah. Then they start slow on a year where basically jobs are on the line. Like if Toronto blows this thing up after this year, if Dubas and Keefe get fired, it's not just going to be Dubas and Keefe. There's probably going to be a bigger trade, a blockbuster trade that's going to change the outlook of this team. And I'm not saying it's Matthews. It could be Marner. It could be Muzzin or Nylander. It could be Tavares. Could be Riley. Whomever. But there's going to be a shakeup. The next GM's not going to come in and say, I'm going to be the GM. Here's your coach. Here's all the same players that you had. Like Toronto didn't do anything last year. They signed Yarncrog. They signed Ashton Reese. They signed Abe Kubel. They signed Victor Mente. They signed depth pieces and expected the same outcome. What's the definition of insanity? Because that's where we're going. But then everyone at the start of the year, when people who watch the Leafs, who actually like the Leafs, who have gone through all the shitty years as being a Leafs fan, say things need to change because I'm not even interested in this anymore. Then the people who are quote unquote hockey experts on Twitter say, no, it's the same as last year. That's not acceptable. That's not an excuse. That's not a reason as to why I shouldn't panic or why I'm not interested. Because last year proved that their slow start also came to be their slow start in the playoffs or mediocre slow start, which ended up being a first round exit. So now what? If we have a slow start that doesn't get caught, what is going to happen? Are they even going to make the playoffs? Because there's a chance that they might. There's a chance that they might not. Sorry, there's a chance that they might have another first round exit. Like I just don't understand how that's an acceptable answer from Leafs fans who are just constantly bitching and badging or battering or whatever the word I'm trying to think of on Kyle Dubas about how he needs to step it up, but then they're giving the same excuse because they don't want to admit that there's panic. I just don't understand how that works.
I, I don't know. Like just to go back to the one point you made, like on I guess on paper, I guess is the key term because that doesn't always translate to on ice. But on paper, this team that's assembled this year, I think, is better than last year's team. Like we lost, who did we lose? Kasha and Mikheyev and Spezza really on forward, and we replaced them. None of them scoring over 30 points with Yarncroke, Austin Reese, and Abe Kubel. None of them probably scoring over 30 points. Maybe Yarncroke potentially gets there, depending
I
on who
think
he's playing with
Mikheyev
for the
has
rest
a
of the year.
chance to score over 30 points.
Yeah, but he didn't with the Leafs, is what I meant.
Yeah, he did. Didn't he score 30 points last year? Didn't he have like
I,
21 goals last year?
I thought he scored like in like just over 20 last year.
Oh, maybe he did. Anyways, continue the point.
But like on paper, this team I think was better than last year's team. It's just the on ice stuff that is messing everything up. They just don't look interested in playing. Like barring last night's game, I guess, and maybe the first game where I guess they did blow the lead in Montreal, but the first game of the season, and then that game against Winnipeg, like every other game they've played, they just have not looked interested in playing. They've gone stretches or most of the game where they just played like crap, and the other team took advantage of it. And you could say like, yeah, that happened last year, which to me it didn't. But like this team, I think if they were playing up to their ability, is better than last year's team.
Yeah, and again, the point I can't seem to wrap my head around that, or I can't seem to figure out why people can't wrap their head around is Mitch Marner, 25, Austin Matthews, 24, Nylander, 20, going to be 27. This isn't the same team that's 2 years ago or 3 years ago that people can say, oh, don't worry, or oh, it's going to be okay. It's the same thing that happened last year. Like Mitch or Austin Matthews is one calendar year away from potentially walking away. Like he could not re-sign this whole next year, and then he's gone. And then every single one of those people that are saying, "Oh, don't worry about it, it's just a slow start." Why? I was actually confused on why this guy commented on the post saying that. It just made no sense to me. And then I said the team seems disengaged. He went on. I think he just liked it, but then I think at one point he replied something along the lines of basically, yeah, like, um, whatever he said. It's the same as last year. Blah blah blah. They look disengaged. Yeah, the team looked disengaged because Matthews was pissed off at Justin Hall last year when he yelled at Justin Hall. This year, it's like Matthews is fanning on one timers. Marner's turning over 18 pucks a game. There's things to panic about, in my opinion. Like truthfully, things to panic about. Truthfully, not even as a regular Leafs fan, just as a hockey fan, I would be panicking if I was a Leafs fan. It just seems like a time to panic because of the things that have been happening. Also, another thing that I want to point out to you, Scott, because this really pissed me off, and I heard the other day when I was walking out of Tim Hortons, had my headphones on, walking out with my tea. Okay, listen to 32 Thoughts, the podcast, and our good buddy Jeff Merrick says what?
Probably something dumb.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. You're right. He said there's 3 million people that are apparently there's 3 million people that are Leafs fans in the city of Toronto, and there's 6 million Leafs fans in the GTA. Okay. Then he went on to say, "What are those 6 million Leafs fans or Leaf fan GMs or whatever word he used thinking right now? There's more than 6 million Leaf fans.
Yeah, but not in the GTA because that's the population of the GTA.
I know, I know that, I get it, but it's like, don't just. This isn't Columbus. This isn't Washington. This is the Toronto Maple Leafs. I hate when people say only the people from the GTA matter. For those who don't know, the GTA is the Greater Toronto Area. It's all the communities and cities around Toronto in this big, basically circle. Anyways, that irritates me because we're not from the GTA and we like the Leafs and we could be actually some people I think that move to Toronto become a Leafs fan because they live in that city. Like there's diehard Leafs fans in freaking England and France and New Zealand. We have listeners from New Zealand that listen to this podcast that I'm gonna assume are probably Leafs fans. But then the nerve of someone to say, "What are those 6 million Leafs fans?" I understand the pun of it or whatever, like 6 million population, whatever. But that irritates me because like it just makes it seem like there's such a small panic. Like 6 million people is obviously big, but you understand what I mean? It's like it
Yeah,
appears as though they don't realize that the whole province almost is all almost I'd say probably 90% of the province is Toronto Maple Leafs fans, and then a good portion of Canadian uh, citizens or people who live in Canada, as well as people who live in America, go to an Arizona game, go to a Florida game. Like I just don't understand why people say that, and it irritates me to no end because it's like my opinion might be actually more valid, or I might be a bigger Leafs fan from a small little town an hour and a half south or north of Toronto, same as you, as someone who lives right beside the arena. And that actually pissed me off. I was like, why would you should have edited that on the podcast,
yeah.
in my
Like
opinion.
it is annoying, irritating when people do they say that, and I don't like Jeff Merrick. I've said that for years. I think he's annoying to me. I think he kind of just hopped on Elliot Friedman and then became a bigger name because of it. But in that instance, I don't think he was saying that only people who live in the GTA are Leafs fans. I think he was just speaking directly to the GTA because that's where he was based out of. That's where he most of his viewers come from is the GTA. So I don't think he was necessarily insulting the rest of the Leafs fans. I think he was just talking to the GTA because that's where he is that's where he is. Right? It's like people from the Rangers. The Rangers have fans all over the continent, Canada, US, but when you listen to podcasts or you listen to news and stuff, they only ever really mention New York.
Yeah, it's true.
So I don't necessarily think, and I could be wrong. He could have just been poking fun at how only people who live in the GTA are Leafs fans or whatever. Which, if he did, that's completely idiotic because they have the biggest fan base in the league. But in to me, it just seems like he was just talking to who he knew would have been listening, and that's people in the GTA because that's his biggest fan base because that's where he is.
Either way, still a dumb comment, and
But
that stuff
just
irritates me in
before
general.
we go to the ad break here, I just want to point out one thing, and I think I may be in the minority here, but I chalk the slow start, and this may be after you have kind of ripped on people for saying it, yada yada yada. But I blame the slow start on Sheldon Keefe, and you could argue against it, you could argue for it, whatever. But it just seems like the decisions he's made on who to put in the lineup and when to put them in the lineup and why he's taking people out, like we mentioned at the beginning of the podcast, and in-game decisions he's made where he doesn't like if you're down a goal with 10 minutes left, he never double shifts Matthews He never double shifts Tavares. He continues the 4-line cycle with 3 minutes left. Friggin' Simmons, Clifford, and Camp hop over the boards when you're down a goal. And if that was Edmonton, if that was Pittsburgh, if that was Washington, if that was LA in their prime with Kopitar, like the last 2.5 minutes, McDavid's hopping over the boards, Crosby's hopping over the boards, Ovechkin's hopping over the boards. The last 10 minutes, those top guys are playing 6.5, maybe 7 minutes of that to try to get that goal. If they have to play 27 minutes a game, then that's what they had to do. And it's always annoyed me that Sheldon Keefe never does that. There's times where Matthews plays more than everybody else, but if they're down a goal with 10 minutes left, he just continues the traditional routine he has where Matthews line comes out, Tavares lines come out, then another line comes out. They get an offensive zone face off, then Matthews comes back out. But if they get a defensive zone face off, then David Kampf's line comes back out. Like if you're down a goal with 5 minutes left, 10 minutes left, you should be double shifting your star players because they're the ones who are going to get you the goal. You pay them the big money to do that. Put them in situations where they can do that. The defense is a whole nother story. He seems to have bias, and we've pointed this out. I don't remember if it was on podcast or off podcast, but he seems to have bias towards players that he coached in the Toronto Marlies. There's no reason Justin Hall should be playing
Yeah.
21 minutes a game. He's your third line defense pair. On any other team in the league, he probably isn't even that. Like he's been playing like crap this year. I mean, you aren't fans of him. We've pointed that out since the moment he came to the Leafs. There has been stretches where he's played well. I'll give him that. Last night, apparently, we were busy, so we didn't necessarily watch the full game. But apparently, he played well last night. But the previous 7 games before that, he played like crap. There's no reason he should even have been in the lineup for 3 of those games. Like in the game against who was it, LA, where he took the 2 penalties that they scored on, and then he was on the ice for the other 2 goals. Like if that was any other player on the team, if that was Nick Robertson, he would have got sent back down to the minors. If that was
Yep.
Dennis Mulligan, he would have got benched.
Yep.
Same as Pierre Engvall. 1 goal. You pay this guy 1.5. Is that what his salary is?
No, 2.25.
2.25, and he has 1 goal in the first 9 games. And I get that he's not a point producer.
Yeah, but he's
He
supposed to be. But he's
Yeah,
supposed
he
to be
was
the
supposed to have.
replacement of Kiev.
Yeah, but like to have 1 goal in the first 9 games and you're still getting ice time. Dennis Mulligan has 2 goals in the 4 games he's played in, and he's been benched for 5 games.
Yep.
I actually don't know if those are the right numbers. The goals is, but
Yeah,
I
I
don't know
think
if
I
they're right
think
for
he
him. I
has
think he's
been
played
benched
5
for
games.
5 games.
Nick Robertson had 2 goals in his first game. 2 games later, he's on the bench. He's in the press box because he's not putting
He
up points.
he literally helped Sheldon Keefe calm the fire in that game. Because if they
But
would have
yeah,
lost that game against Dallas and then went on to this Western Road Spring, he probably would have been canned.
like it just the decisions that Sheldon Keefe is making this year, it just doesn't make any sense. Whether it's who's in the lineup at a certain time and why they're in the lineup, or even just on ice decisions, it just doesn't make any sense to me as to why those decisions are made. And I think that plays a big hand in why the team's getting off to a slow start. And I think the team sees it. I think Matthews knows that he should be playing 25 minutes a game. He's the reigning MVP. I think Mitch Marner knows that he should be playing 20, 23 minutes a game. John Tavares knows he should be playing 18 to 22 minutes a game. Nylander knows he should be playing them more than 14 minutes a game. Arguably the best player in the season up to that point. Morgan Riley, although I don't think he's a traditional number one, is our number one defenseman. He should be playing 24, 25 minutes a game. But instead, you have everybody's ice time decreasing. Matthews playing what, 21, if that, sometimes 19. Nylander, that one game, like I mentioned, playing 14, so that Justin Hall and Pierre Engvall and whoever else can get more ice time. Like those guys shouldn't be getting the ice time over your superstar and reigning MVP style players. There's no world besides the one we live in right now where Justin Hall plays more than TJ Brody.
Yeah.
And yeah, whatever, throw advanced analytics all you want. There's stretches of the games, if not most of the game, where Justin Hall is playing like crap. He has not been good, barring Philly game and maybe a couple of the games here and there. But I'm going to say 6 of the 9 games they played so far, he's playing himself out of a spot on the roster. Yet somehow he's still in the lineup playing 18 to 20 minutes a game for no reason other than Sheldon Keefe likes him because he coached him in the Marlies. So I just think that everybody's blaming the players. I get the Sheldon Keefe fire Carl Dubas because they don't win in the playoffs, which may be valid this year if they don't win in the playoffs. But I feel like, and even John Tortorella was praising Sheldon Keefe.
Yeah,
Why?
but
Be-
here's the reason for that. He coached Sheldon Keefe, and Sheldon Keefe, John Tortorella was the first coach that Sheldon Keefe contacted when he got his junior A job.
Okay, that may be still like there may be a relationship there, but John Tortorella has to know that the Leafs are playing like crap. That Sheldon Keefe maybe isn't making the best choices. And I get maybe you're not going to go into the meeting. John Tortorella specifically, I guess, would be the one to do it, which kind of baffled me as he was only singing praise to Sheldon Keefe.
Yeah, I think that's only
Like,
because he hates media.
well, yeah, but usually John Tortorella doesn't care what he says. If people have a problem with it, then that's their problem, not his.
That's true. Yeah.
So it just seems like he was kind of downplaying the impact that Keefe may be having on the team. And I haven't really been seeing, besides maybe the Twitter fans or other fans, there hasn't really been much talk of how much blame Sheldon Keefe should have for his poor coaching decision so far. Everybody's talking about how a trade needs to happen, or Matthews needs to step up, or Marner needs to step up, or
Yeah,
Riley needs to
probably
step
because
up. And
everyone in this world knows that Kyle Dubas is probably not going to fire Sheldon Keefe.
well, yeah, and I get that, but that doesn't mean that you still can't blame him for the slow start.
No, I
Like,
agree. I agree.
like this team, barring 2 or 3 players, is almost the exact same team we had last year. There's
Yep.
no reason that this team should be playing this bad when it's almost identical to last year's roster. Like last year, the slow start, whatever, but we set the record for the best season the Leafs have ever had. Coming into this season, after last year's Tampa loss, their interest in winning and their confidence and their intrigue in playing should have been at an all-time high. And it just seems like the guys who carried over from last year just don't seem interested in playing anymore. And it just
Yeah. Well,
everybody's blaming the players. Some people are blaming Dubas. Some people have even put videos on Twitter ripping on Kyle Dubas' grandma. Like, but I
because
haven't
of
really seen many people saying, "Hey, Sheldon Keefe needs to be blamed as much," because there's times in the games where he makes stupid decisions. And even last year, you could argue the playoffs last year too. He was outcoached by Tampa's coach. Some of the decisions he made last year were dumb. That seems to have carried over into this season, and I just haven't seen a lot of people talking about that. How Keefe deserves just as much blame for the way the team has started as the players that are being blamed. Kyle Dubas, who's being blamed, even the fans who are being blamed for some reason because we put too much pressure on the players.
I
When you're when, oh,
I I sorry. I just think it's the most interesting thing about that is there's some media members that had going back to the John Tortorella point. Quick, sorry, is some media members actually had issue with what John Tortorella said. Like they're like, do you really think it's the media members that are driving Sheldon Keefe out of town? Like obviously they write the stories, but like, do you think a media member has enough pull in this town to say, you know what I mean?
yeah,
Typically, historically, Toronto has done things based on what fans want. So I just thought that just quickly. I was actually just going scrolling through Twitter um, while you're talking, and I saw David Alter, and he was one of the people who I know was angry. But anyways, continue with your points.
oh yeah, I just, just, I feel like Sheldon Keefe isn't as good a coach as everybody is saying he has been, mostly because of who's on the team. Like when the team, Austin Matthews is putting up 60 goals and the team's setting records because of who's on the team. Like, yeah, I get Sheldon Keefe may have had a hand in that because he decides who plays when. But when you have pretty much 4 100-point players, like, like I think that's going to overshadow the poor decisions the coach makes. And when it comes
Yeah,
to the playoffs, that's a whole other story because like he was outcoached by Tampa and then Montreal and then Columbus and
yeah,
then
and Dominic Ducharme of all people.
yeah, Tampa Bay again and Washington. Actually, I think Babcock was the coach of Washington, but
Yeah,
people just seem to completely gloss over the fact that makes stup he doesn't make the best coaching decisions at moments in games, and this season it's costing the Leafs. I think anyway.
Um, Sorry, some news came down the pipe. I just want to quickly mention. Um, I don't know if anyone's familiar, but Scott, are you familiar? Sorry, it's a little off topic, but I just thought I want to get it on here. You familiar with the Kyrie Irving anti-Semitic
Yeah,
situation? Yeah, he just got suspended no less than 5 games.
good. See, yeah.
Anyways, nice.
And then there's the whole what's that guy's name? The water and the frog, something in the water that's turning the friggin' frogs gay or whatever he said. Alex Jones. The whole
Who's
Alex
Alex
Jones
Jones?
debacle. He's the guy that's being sued for the Sandy Hook. He said they were all crisis actors.
No, I don't. Is
He's
that an
like the
actor?
he's like the Trump supporter. He does like a podcast where he throws out
Oh,
far
yeah,
right political
I don't know who that is. But
conspiracy
anyways,
theories. But apparently Kyrie Irving is some of the stuff that he throws around conspiracy theories. Kyrie Irving is in support of. Like he said, like they asked him in the interview. He's like the Sandy Hook stuff, no, but he said that there's other stuff that Alex Jones talks about that he agrees with. So it doesn't surprise me at all that he would come out with anti-Semitic remarks and all the other stuff that he said, like the Earth is flat.
yeah.
Moron.
Um, yeah, a whole bunch of morons live in this world, including Shelby Keefe. All right, so I'm gonna suggest that we do the ad break, and then if it's cool with you, we're gonna wrap it up. If that's cool.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. It doesn't matter.
Okay. There's not gonna be a betting segment, obviously, this week because Kyle's off.
Oh,
Um,
I'll do the band segment. Bet for the Leafs to lose against Boston and then win every game for the rest of the year.
all right, if you bet that, you could be a millionaire. Um, I guess
They're gonna
quickly,
go
if you
like
just want to,
74, 7-1. That's my that's
if
my
you
prediction.
quickly want to go through the recap of the games. I know we already touched on a lot of points, so I guess if we just go over the recaps and then,
Oh, we can do that
um,
after the ad break, though. No, because
yeah, that's what I mean. It's like
yeah,
ad break, then we'll just go to the recaps. We're trying to keep these podcasts about 55 minutes, I think. Then it takes us to about an hour once we add in all the extra effects. Um, so if that's cool with you, we'll get to the ad break now. We'll get to a little recap of the
hmm
games, and then we'll close her off. Alrighty,
yep.
here she goes. Hockey fans, it's finally time to hit the ice again, and thanks to DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NHL, you're in for a season of a lifetime. New customers can bet just $5 on any team and get $200 in free bets if they win. One team I'm going to place a bet on is the Toronto Maple Leafs to win the Stanley Cup at plus 700. And if that wasn't enough excitement, you can turn small bets into bigger payouts with same game parlays. Combine multi bets like which team will win, how many goals will be scored, and more for your shot to win even bigger payouts. DraftKings is safe, secure, and reliable. You can deposit and withdraw your money whenever you want. So download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now and use promo code THPN. Bet $5 on any team to win their game and get $200 in free bets if they do. That code, THPN, at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NHL. Minimum age and eligibility restrictions apply. See notes for details. All right, there you have it. THPN is the promo code that you're going to put into DraftKings. You're going to bet some money. You're going to first upload some money or deposit some money, and then you're going to throw it to some Leafs games, and you're going to win some big dollars. Scott, you're going to hit off with the game recap quickly. I just have to excuse myself for about 20 seconds.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll be right
So
back.
recap. We have October 27th. They played the third game of their West Coast swing against San Jose, where they lost 4-3. Marner scored his second of the season. Camp scored his third, and Matthews scored his second of the season as well. It was nice to see both Matthews and Marner contribute offensively, but it was just the continuation of poor play from the Leafs that caused them to lose. Poor play that would continue for the next couple games. Games like October 29th versus LA, where they lost 4-2, and October 30th versus Anaheim, where they blew a 3-1 lead and lost 4-3. In those games, Engvall scored his first and only point of the season. Tavares scored his fourth. And then at Anaheim, Yarncroc scored his second, Malgin scored his second, and Matthews scored his third. It's nice to see Matthews start to pick things back up here because on November 2nd, last night against Philadelphia, where the Leafs won 5-2, he also scored his fourth of the season. Zach Austin Reese potted his first of the season, and John Tavares stepped up big with a hat trick, who now has 7 on the season and 14 points, which I think he leads the team in points now. And Samsonov got his fifth win, which is only solidifying him, I think, as the better goalie and choice to Matt Murray because he's now won 5 of his first 7 games, which I think is kind of shocking, not necessarily overly surprising because everybody thought he was going to take over as the starter at some point this season anyway. But the fact that the Leafs have been playing so poorly and he still has 5 wins is kind of impressive to me.
Oh, you talking about Sammy?
Yeah,
Yeah, and Sammy we trust.
yeah,
Yeah, I've been super impressed by Samsonov.
yeah.
Super impressed.
Me too. I
He holds
think,
his own. He's composed, and he's becoming a fan favorite. Remember when Mikheyev came here and all he kept talking about was soup?
yeah.
All Samsonov keeps talking about is how after he wins, he gets a smile.
Oh yeah.
So now he's becoming a fan favorite in the media or media favorite because he's fun to interview and apparently he's very emotionful. Like when he talks to them after a game, he's super happy. When he talks to them after a loss, he's super depressed. So
It'd be interesting to see. Matt Murray played 2 games, correct?
one,
He only played one,
yes
and he
sir,
lost, right? The opener to
Montreal, yeah.
Montreal, right? And he lost. It'd be interesting to see what Toronto's record would be, and if maybe their play would kind of not necessarily reflect the record, but maybe they would have played a little better if Matt Murray was there. No offense to Shalgren, but Matt Murray was in the goal for the Vegas, the San Jose, and the Anaheim games.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't often wondered that myself, but yeah, now that you said it,
Like,
I
I
think
mean, obviously, the problems they have go farther than just their backup goalie, but if
yeah,
the Shogun hasn't played bad per se, it's
but he's
mostly
slow
been,
starting.
yeah, the other aspects of the team that have been poor that have kinda cost him the wins, but it just would have been interesting to see if Matt Murray wouldn't have gotten hurt, Shalgren would have still played the same games, but Matt Murray was in instead of Samsonov played the same games, and Matt Murray was in instead of Shalgren.
I
Would
agree.
they, have been in the slide that they were in, or would they kind of have won 2 of 3 or 1 of the 3 or whatever?
I agree with that thought, like that wonder, because Shalgren started slow in all three of the games, and Matt Murray, even in preseason and in that first game, started like solid right off the start. So
Yeah,
that could have changed the whole outlook on how things are
and, like,
going.
those issues the Leafs have were clearly noticeable from the first game where they lost to Montreal, but it's just would the panic be as high if the Leafs had 2 more wins and they had only lost 3 times instead of 5 times or however many games they've lost? I think they're what, 5, and 1, 2,
Yeah, something like
5,
that.
4,
I
4,
think they play
5,
11
4, 4,
games.
2,
Yeah,
something
something
like
like that.
that. Yeah, it just would the panic still be there if they had a 2 more win record than they have now, and the kinda, yeah, the win-loss record isn't as noticeable? Would the play still be as highlighted as it is? I think maybe, depending, like Matthew's slow start, the, the Robertson-Malgin rotational bottom 6 kinda thing, I think would still be talked about, but I don't necessarily think the poor start narrative of that we talked about and everybody else would have been as blown up as it is if the record was different. Even if they were still playing the same way, I feel
Yeah,
like the record will compensate for those poor play and poor performances.
I I couldn't actually agree more. To be honest, now that you said that, I think that there could be a real chance that the temperature would have been turned down. The other thing I think is weird about sports is like after they won last night, everyone like most the fan base just took a deep breath. It was like, ah, we're fine now. We won.
Well, yeah, we're not though.
We're good. Everything's good. Like that's
It's the
what
same
David
thing that
Arthur
happened.
said in his post game. He's just like the temperature turned down, but once they lose again, it's going to be
It's this,
a
it's
rampant.
the same thing that happened against Winnipeg,
Yeah,
where they played poorly going into that game, where against they didn't play well with Montreal and Ottawa or whatever, and then they
yeah, and
won
then
against Winnipeg, and everybody's like, "Oh, the Leafs are back," and then we've lost 4 of the last 5, or
yeah, and that's the only game I'll give it to them. I'll give it to you guys. They lost two, or they won against. They're 1-1. They played poorly against Ottawa, but they still won. And then yeah, they script on a win against Winnipeg, and people are oh okay yeah great. Maybe the two wins in a row or whatever it was can help them. But then they lost four, and then they won one, and they're like oh
yeah,
we're
the
good.
problems aren't gonna go away because they
The
won 1
boys
game.
are back, but yeah, you're right. Like they
Ma
played decently well from what I understand. Like as Scott mentioned, we didn't watch the game. We had other commitments, but from what other people said, including Jamal Maris after the game, was and Sammy Cosentino, sorry, was when it was 3-1 in the second period and Philly scored, apparently, or 2-1 or whatever it was, and Toronto scored whatever it was. Um, it appeared that Toronto was going back to their ways against Anaheim
Yeah,
when they were only up by one goal. So it's like, are they really gone, or are you just masking the happiness by a W?
yeah, and, like, yeah, the problems just aren't gonna vanish because they won 1 game. Although, if Sam Samsonov keeps playing well like this, Matthews seems to be picking it up a bit because that's his 3rd goal in the last 4 games.
Yeah,
Tavares
he's got
seems to be
7
picking it
assists too, I think.
Tavares seems to be picking it up a lot because that's obviously a hat trick for 7, and he has 14 points.
Yeah, he's got a point in
Uh,
every game, I think.
Nylander's kinda cooled off a bit,
Yeah, I mean, but he somehow got
and
demoted.
well, yeah, and if Marner can pick it up, like, things are seeming to be turning around, but just because they won the 1 game doesn't mean that the Leafs are back and they're gonna start steamrolling all the teams like they did last year, where they won
Saturday will
19
be
or
a
17
test.
or whatever, but yeah,
Saturday, 9
against
and 1
Boston,
Boston Bruins, but also next
which
week will
is
be
a
a test
surprise.
because yeah, yeah, but next week they play 4 games, including a back-to-back with Pittsburgh and Vancouver. So if they can scrape off 2 wins at the start of the week, or even including Saturday, of the 5 games that they have from Saturday to Saturday, if they can scrape off 2 wins, they should be able to beat Vancouver. Although I think Vancouver is the second half of the back-to-back against Pittsburgh, but they should still be able to beat Vancouver because Vancouver, obviously, as we know, isn't the hottest team in the NHL.
Yeah,
So we could go 3-2 this week, which would maybe not be ideal. Maybe 4-1 would be better. However, it's still better than 0-4 on a road trip. So,
yeah,
or one
and
and
his
five on a road
Liljegren's
trip.
back on Saturday too, isn't he?
Saturday, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, and Jamie
and,
Benn's not far behind.
so that means that
And
Kral probably gets sent back down. Liljegren will slot in, and Mete will be scrubbed.
yeah, and I would
Uh,
imagine that I would hope that somehow they fit Robinson back in here, but I think that
yeah,
they'll go with the same lineup
probably.
besides Lilligren.
To me, it should be, and I know we've mentioned it a lot this podcast, but Engvall should be out. Robertson should take his spot.
Yeah, I agree. Um, the other thing is, but quickly before we wrap up here, sorry. Would you say like Mete's out obviously if Lilligren's back? Would you put Lilligren with Giordano right away? Because that leaves like it
No,
would probably be I in my opinion, I
I mean,
probably would because it leaves Riley, who's a good two-way defender, I think, both ways. Although he's supposed to be offensively minded, he can skate with Hall, Sandin with Brody. So Sandin becomes the elite player, offensive player that he can be, and then Giordano Lilligren can shut it down.
yeah. So if I was the coach, I would do Sandine Riley, Sandine, Brody, Mete, Liljegren, Giordano, or Giordano Liljegren. But because Sheldon Keefe is the coach, I feel like it'll be Riley or Brody Hall, Riley, Sandine, and then Giordano Liljegren. Yeah. So I guess yeah. Either way, I would put Liljegren with back with Giordano. but it's just who else is slotting the lineup based on my own personal opinion or who I think Sheldon Keefe would
And
be putting in. Yeah,
I hope that Jordy Ben's back soon, because if Jordy Ben's back, then maybe just maybe, because Sheldon Keefe had mentioned that one of the reasons why they haven't done too much with their lineup, and other media members have kind of alluded to this, the reason why Sheldon Keefe behind closed doors had mentioned that he hasn't done too much with his lineup is because they don't have a lot of depth in that department, whereas they did forward. So if Jordy Ben comes back and Lilligren comes back and they've got Mete, that's three defense who can play in the NHL. Maybe giving Justin Hall a day off.
probably not.
But if they do, it won't be because he poorly played. It will be because he's been utilized so much.
I feel like when Jordy Ben comes back, Victor Mete will be sent down. Lilligren comes back, Philip Carl will be sent down, and then Jordy Ben will be the extra, and Justin Hall will stay in the lineup.
Hey, a boy can dream, man.
Well, yeah, obviously that's the ideal situation is for us as we would rather have Brody or Jordy Ben in at this point over Justin Hall. But with Sheldon
Yeah.
Keefe as the coach, Justin Hall staying in until there comes a point where he absolutely needs to come out, which I feel like already should have happened, but it hasn't. So I feel like the lineup will stay similar. Sandino moved back up with Brody, and then Lilligren will slot back in with Giordano just because they played so well together last year.
Also, I'm surprised Philip Kral got the call up and not Mac Hollowell, because I'm pretty sure Mac Hollowell, sorry, is a right hand defenseman, which they needed,
Yeah,
because they were playing
I
Philip
mean,
Kral with Justin Hall, and I'm just like, you basically got two HL defensemen there.
yeah, like Philip Carl didn't play that well in the 2 games
No,
they
yeah, I
played,
agree. I
but
agree with that. I just think, like, in actuality, you needed a right-hand shot. Philip Kral and Matt
well,
Hollowell are probably around the
maybe
same on the depth chart.
maybe they. I don't know how old Philip Carl is. I think he's a couple years older than
23, 22.
Hollowell, right? And
No,
Hollowell's what?
I think Matt Hollowell's older. Actually, yeah, Philip Kral just turned 23, and Matt Hollowell, I think, turned 25.
Oh, okay, then never mind. I was gonna say maybe they didn't want Hollowell to come up and kind of like lose confidence in his game
Well, I
because
think it's
he would have been
interesting
put
that
in this a similar
I
situation to Philip Carl. But
I
if he's
guess I should
older,
have added this.
then that doesn't make
Pardon?
any sense. Because I
What'd you say,
said
sorry?
that I thought Hollowell would have been like they didn't call up Hollowell because they didn't want to put him in a situation for him to lose confidence. So they would have kept him in the minors to play. But if Philip
Uh,
Carl is younger, then that doesn't make any sense because I thought they would have said
and
that was the younger of the two. But
that year, remember, what was it, the bubble year or the Canadian Division League year when they had the after Christmas start?
yeah,
Joe Thornton was on the team, right? Yeah.
yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Mac Hollowell was on the team. He was just the extra defenseman for most of the year, like
Hmm.
a good portion of the year. He even was quarantining with them. Like he quarantined with Matthews, Marner, and Thornton. So it's like I'm curious as to why they don't give him a chance, because I believe, I could be wrong. I haven't looked it up. I believe he's right-handed. So if he's right-handed and you could add that right-hand shot who's only playing 8 minutes a game.
True.
Also, the other thing before we wrap up here, because this is a vitally important thing.
Just real quick. That's the Hollowell thing. That's true. But if he's going to get called up and then he's going to be sitting out every other game, then that's not really a point of him being called up.
No, I agree. I just mean, like, realistically, there's like, if he played decent like Philip Kral and he's a right-hand shot, they should just kept him in the lineup.
Well, yeah, but with Lilligren coming back and them not moving on
Oh yeah,
Justin Hall
yeah.
and then Sandin playing the right side, I don't
No,
see
yeah,
him
I agree with that.
unless Lilligren plays bad here or there. I don't see the extras being really utilized that often, even if it's Mete or Jordy Ben.
Yeah, I agree with that. Um, I also just quickly here, Cam Jansen, listen to Cam Strick podcast. Cam Jansen also mentioned the point that you can't really judge a player like Zach Aston Reese or Abe Kubel, because they talked about the Leafs on there, obviously, and how Cam Strickland thinks that, Andy Strickland thinks that Sheldon Keefe has lost the room. And then they talked about kind of what we talked about, how you're putting guys in for one night and then taking them out and put them in, and there's no room to get equated with your guys and whatever. And Cam Jansen said, basically, when you're playing a guy 6 minutes a game, what's the point? Like, what's the difference between having Zach Aston Reese and Wayne Simmons? Because they're like, you're not giving Zach Aston Reese a chance. So
Yeah,
basically, I think the message of his moral of the story is like, he's been there, and it's like, you're only playing 6 minutes. How are you going to judge a guy on 6 minutes of play?
which is exactly what we've been saying.
Yeah, which is I mean, like, I'm not expecting them to play Zach Aston Reese 12 minutes or 14 minutes, but it's like the other thing that he had mentioned is like Mitch Marner is one of the best players. They both agree that Mitch Marner is probably one of the best, if not the best, winger in the league. And they're like, you're playing this guy every chance you get. every single chance you get, penalty kill, power play, extra attacker, 4-on-4, 3-on-3, every chance you get. But then you got guys playing 4 to 5, 6 minutes a game that you could put out. Like, why couldn't you put Zach Aston Reese on for a shift for Mitch Marner? I know Mitch Marner's your best penalty killer, but like, could you not put him out there for a shift? And I thought, I was like, damn, that's. I mean, I really like Cam Jansen. Like, just his ideology is about the game is kind of interesting because he was that guy that fought and played 5 minutes a game. But basically, yeah, his point is just in line with us. Was like, why are you switching flipping out the lineups so much when you're playing a guy 4 or 5 minutes, 6 minutes a game, and he can't really get like equated or chemistry or like what's that? An average shift in the NHL is like 40 seconds. So he's playing what,
Yeah.
7, 8 shifts? So
Yeah, something like
I
that.
mean, actually, no, they shift way more than 7 or 8 shifts. He just that last line plays less seconds, I think,
Yeah.
because you're right. He does shift out the 4 line system, but I think they play a little bit less than 40 or 50 seconds like Matthews does. So, anyways, just kind of a cool way to wrap it up because we have been saying things that like NHL reporters and NHL players have. I mean, it does. We're not rocket scientists. That's not what I'm saying. Just simply, it's cool to kind of be reassured with some of the things that we're saying that we're not spewing bullshit like Kyrie Irving is. Um, so with that, Scott, you good? You got anything else to add?
No.
Okay, so with that, we will be trying to promote, share, and all that other stuff a little bit differently because we notice that our viewership is down, and obviously we want it to be up. So if you can, if you listen, if you're a regular listener, whoever that guy was, if you do listen, who tagged us in that post about William Nylander and Mark Giordano, thank you. Although we didn't necessarily agree with what you said, thanks for tagging us in it. Share, like, comment, tweet, everything like that. Get it out there to your friends so then we can do some cool things because we have ideas for giveaways and stuff, but we're not getting any interactions on Twitter. We're not getting any, well, barely any. We're not getting any big amounts of viewership like we used to last season and earlier than in the preseason and the off season. So if we can turn that around, we understand that there is other Leafs talk um, podcasts. We were around first, so we understand that they're under a bigger umbrella, but we are still three Leafs fans who aren't paid. So give us a listen, share it to your friends, and enjoy.
Thank you.
Have a good night, everyone.